Good morning. I'm back. What a great morning to be in church, eh? Yes. Real privilege to be back with you this morning, and especially to be able to share some thoughts from the Bible on a morning as exciting as this. My prayer for you five that got baptized today is that you wouldn't look back on today and remember it as the pinnacle of your faith. I pray today wouldn't be the mountaintop, but today would be a day from which you foundationed a platform that you could keep building with Jesus, that your relationship could keep growing and keep moving forwards and keep developing. And we're in a preaching series at the moment called Pushing Through the Plateau, and I want to spend just a few minutes talking to you about the theme of intimacy this morning. And I think the sad thing is a lot of people that get baptized end up looking back and it was their mountaintop experience. Yeah, they had that moment where they said, I want to commit to Jesus, but then life gets in the way and trials come and pressures come. And before you know it, it feels like your faith has started to plateau. And my prayer is that would not be the case for the five that have been baptized this morning, but they will go from strength to strength with Jesus. But it's important if we want to have longevity in our faith, if we want to know that in 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years' time, we're going to be even closer to God than we are right now, then we need to know what intimacy with him means. And we need to know how we can maintain it. And that's what I want to look at this morning, because intimacy in its simplest sense is just a closeness of connection. A closeness of connection. And what I've learned over the years is that relationships of all sorts start to dwindle when intimacy gets compromised. So when marriages fall apart, normally it's because at some point the closeness of connection that existed between husband and wife has broken down. When friends drift apart and lose touch, it's normally because they've stopped creating opportunities to be close and to feel close to each other. And I think there are elements of our human relationships like that transfer to our relationship with God, but not all of them. Because our relationship with God, I think, is even more complex. And the Bible teaches us that Jesus is God, so I might use those two names in an interchangeable way this morning. But Jesus is God, and God is ever present. And God is ever interested, and he ever loves us. But at times, as we heard in all of those testimonies this morning, we can find ourselves in a place where we don't feel that connected. And that's really interesting. And so I want to look at a passage in the New Testament this morning for a few minutes and look at an example where intimacy is compromised, and look at how we can learn from that to hopefully avoid the same thing happening in our lives. So we're going to read from a short passage in Luke 10, verses 38 to 42. I'm reading from the NIV. I think it will come up on the screen behind me as well. It says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, the Lord said, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. And I guess the overarching message today, in everything that I want to say, is that intimacy gets compromised when we have no capacity. Intimacy gets compromised when we don't create space, basically. And as some of you will know us, Maz and I my wife made a pretty big decision recently, which was to move our family home back to London, where we work, having lived here for a long time. And it was a really big decision. It was one that we tortured over for 2 or 3 years, probably, before we made it. But ultimately, the final straw that broke the camel's back in that decision was a really honest evaluation around our capacity, around how much space we had created in our lives. Now, I don't very often do visual bits when I preach, because I'm, as you can probably tell by the way I'm dressed, the least creative person you'll probably see. But I want to try something this morning, and Jake has volunteered to come and help me for a couple of minutes. Give him some encouragement as he comes. I say he volunteered. I asked him 1 minute before the service, and he didn't have time to say no. So what I want to try and do here in a visual way is show you how Maz and I felt when we made the decision that we made a little while ago. So Jake, I'm going to ask you to hold that. But because Jake's quite strong, as you can see, he's not allowed to hold it like this. You've got to hold it as far out as you can. Okay? Out like that. That's it. It might do. And I'm just going to start adding some bits into this box that represent things that we were juggling in our lives, a few months ago. So let's find some heavy ones. So first of all, family. So we had a marriage to look after, a marriage we're quite fond of. So I'm going to put that in there to start with. Yeah, it's heavy. It feels that heavy sometimes. Right. Then then we've got a couple of children, so they're quite important to us as well. So we want to make sure, one of them's heavier than the other right now. So there you go. One of those. We've both got careers, so we've got 2 jobs that we're trying to manage. So I'm going to put those in there as well. How you feeling? Feeling all right? Yeah? Good. Yeah, okay. So we've got work in there. Then we've got, what else have we got? I'm just going to make sure I get everything here. Then we've got friendships. So we've got some friends that we're quite fond of and we want to keep in touch with. So I'll put a couple of friends in there. I think we have 2 friends. Then we've got, I'll get some lighter ones now, Jake, just so we don't run out. Then we've got church. Church is a big part of our life. So Maz and I were both serving in church. I was serving on the leadership team here. Maz was serving on the hospitality team. How are you feeling?
I reckon you've got about 25 seconds.
Okay. Then we have things like hobbies. We don't get a lot of time for those, but I quite like occasionally playing golf. You going to be all right? If it starts to get too hard, pull it in a bit. And I'll try and find a big one for Maz's shopping, because that's the thing she likes to do. So, right, you can pull it in and hold it normally now.
Okay.
And then we try and put some things like intimacy in there. So you try and have a date night every now and again, or you try and have a bit of time with the kids in the evening. And then on top of all of that, we were commuting to London and spending probably 15 to 20 hours each a week commuting to London, which felt like this. So you probably couldn't hold that out anymore, I'm guessing. You can. Well, he's very strong. I should have picked someone weaker. You can put it down now. Thanks very much. Give him some appreciation. But what I wanted to try and show you there is that we can take lots of really good things and we can shove them into our box of life. And even if all the things in there, and we'd probably agree most of the things in there, pretty good things. But we can all get to a place in our life where we've shoved so much into the box that we're trying to carry that the thing we actually become most aware of is the strain of holding those things and not the value of those good things. And that is how me and Maz felt, I think, a few months ago. And the thing that became really obvious to us was that the thing that was really being sacrificed in all of that was intimacy. We had almost no time for each other in the week to have a normal conversation. Our time with our kids was pressured. We were running for trains, we were late home from work. There wasn't the time just to sit down and enjoy that intimacy with our children. And I know for a fact that my relationship with God was suffering too. There was not enough space in there for me to do the things that I wanted to do, for me to fulfill my commitments to the church, to prepare sermons, to do these sorts of things, and also maintain real intimacy with God in those quiet times. And so that for us was the real catalyst that something had to change. And I think when we look at Martha's behaviour in this passage, there's some comparisons there. You've got Mary here who's just created space, and she said, what I'm going to do is sit at the feet of Jesus, and I'm going to be intimate with him and have time with him. And then you've got Martha, who we're told distracts herself with other things. The logistics of what she was dealing with in that moment were not enough to allow space for the relationship. And I just want to pull 3 very quick thoughts out of that hopefully will encourage us as we consider this. So firstly, when busyness comes, when hectic times in our life come, often we prioritize badly, is the truth, as human beings. So when times of real busyness come, what we do is we do this subconscious calculation where we attribute importance to stuff. And we say, well, that thing is a priority, and so I can't drop that. And that thing is less important, so if that slides this week, then I can live with that. And I think that when we're so manically busy, often the prioritization that we actually do is wrong. And the things that we think are really, really non-tradable are often the kind of everyday stuff. It's the shopping, it's the washing, it's the extra thing of work I've got to do this week, or whatever it might be. And often the things that we're then tempted just to chip away at could be that quiet time I'd put aside to spend with Jesus, to read my Bible this week, or life group that I was going to attend this week, but now I'm too busy. Or Sunday morning actually might be a good opportunity to catch up on some of that stuff instead of going to church. We all probably are guilty of this sort of thing from time to time. When we're overstretched, priorities can get jumbled. The second thing is that we can actually, I think, in modern culture, fool ourselves into thinking that it's irresponsible to create space in our lives. We can almost be led to a place where we feel like we're being bad stewards of our time if we create space and capacity. And I had a real moment of clarity on this a few weeks ago, not long after we'd moved into our new house. So, as you can imagine, new house, lots to do. There was rubbish that needed to go to the tip. There was furniture that needed building. There was stuff that needed hanging on the walls. And I'd had a day where I'd spent the whole day working on house stuff. And then I picked up my son, Finley, who's 5 months old, and I took him up to bed. And I was in his room, rocking him off to sleep. And I felt in that moment that I became aware, or God made me aware, more importantly, that I was almost impatient to get him to sleep. I just wanted to get him off to sleep, get him to bed, so that I could get back to doing one of the trivial jobs I had to do in the house that day. And I really felt God say to me so clearly in that moment, like, what you're doing now is so much more important. Like, this intimate moment you've got with your son, this is why you've moved your family to a different place, to create more space for this. And there was me trying to do that quickly so that I could get back to doing something else that I thought made me more productive in that moment. It's not irresponsible to create space. It's actually really responsible for us to create space in our lives for intimacy. And then the third thing that I quickly want to pull out is that when we don't manage our capacity well, we allow space for resentment to creep in. And that's what happens with Martha here. The thing that Mary is doing is a really good thing. Mary's sitting at the feet of Jesus. But Martha has got herself in such a state here, because it would have been a real privilege, by the way, for her to host Jesus in her house. So for her, she's gone through that prioritization order, and she's gone, even if I don't get to speak to Jesus, the thing I've got to do is host him well. So that's the frame of mind she's in. And she sees her sister make a different choice, which is a much better choice. And rather than acknowledge that she's made a better choice, resentment creeps in. And so she starts to look at something that is really positive and treat it with a resentful mind. And I think that can really happen in our lives too when we're overstretched. Oh, it's life group again this evening. Gosh, I'm just too busy for this. That's a weight I don't need in my life right now. Oh, my best friend's trying to meet up with me again. God, how selfish of them to try and spend time with me. I'm just too busy. And we laugh, but there's some truth in it, isn't there? We can get like that in our lives when we're too busy. And again, I definitely felt like this when we were around the time where we had to make that big decision. And I'll give you an example. So standing up here and preaching is one of the things I love doing more than anything else in this world. It's one of the things I value more than anything else in this world. But at that time in our lives where we were so crushed by capacity or a lack of capacity, preparing to preach became a burden to me. It became something that I almost felt like was a weight I didn't want in that part of my life. When we were trying to arrange to see some of our very best friends, it became more stressful than it became beneficial, because there was no time, there was no space to do it. And so things that had real value, things that were really precious, started to feel like a burden because resentment had set in, because we hadn't created enough space in our lives. And that's what happens with Martha here too, and that is what can happen with every one of us. I wonder if I can invite the band to come back up. It's a really simple message that I felt God wanted me to bring today, but I felt that he was prompting me to put a challenge out there for all of us to take control back of our capacity, to make some intentional decisions to take control back. And for those of you today that have made that decision to be baptized, I pray especially for you that from this day onwards, you would protect that intimate time you have in your week with God. Protect it. Make sure nothing creeps in and takes it. Guard it. Value it. Because that is the thing that's going to give you longevity in your faith. And I talked about that prioritization process a few minutes ago. And when Mariam and I were going through that process a few weeks ago, we actually found it so difficult that we started to write stuff down. And we said what we're going to do is we're going to write down the things that over the next 5 years we think are the most important for our family. And on there were things like being present parents to our kids, and having enough time for each other as a married couple in the week, and having enough time to focus on work when we need to focus on work, and being in a church that we love and we are committed to and we can serve in, and having enough time to be close to God and be an example to our kids in all of that stuff. And by writing it down and actually looking at it that way, what it showed us was that the difference between healthy intimacy and unhealthy intimacy levels in our life was the 15 to 20 hours a week we were spending each on a train. And that was really clarifying for us, and it was something that we then were able to action. And I'll be honest, that was the thing that I for a long time had said, I'm not going to change that. Almost like Martha has gone, this is the thing I'm not going to drop, this hosting thing, I'm not going to let that go. I was like that with where we lived. We were trying to work everything else in our lives around that one thing, because I convinced myself I'd be letting people down if I changed that thing. I'd be letting my family down, I'd be letting my church down, I'd be letting others down if I moved my physical location. But it was really clarifying for us just to create space for God to speak and God to move and God to impact. And maybe that's a process you need to go through this week. Maybe you're kind of empathizing with some of what I'm talking about and you're feeling just that crushing pressure of everything you've got to manage in life. And maybe there are things in your life you've said, I cannot ever drop that thing. And maybe today God's just prompting you to say, you might need to think differently. Because the thing you need more than anything else is intimacy with Jesus Christ. The thing we all need more than anything else is time to sit at his feet and to be close to him. And maybe you're here today or you're listening online and you wouldn't say you're a Christian. You wouldn't say you've made that commitment. You're not even sure maybe how you feel about your faith. But I dare say if you're here or if you're listening online, there must at least be a bit of you that's interested or curious, should we say. And I'd actually encourage you to go through that same process over the next week, to look at your life and go, what are the things that take up my time but don't add the value that they should do? What are the things that make me feel suffocated with capacity when maybe I could just free up a little bit? And my encouragement, my challenge, my advice, whatever you want to call it this week would be, see if you can find at least an hour that you didn't think you had. And if you use that hour to do anything that gives you an intimate moment with Jesus, whether that is just have a crack at reading the Bible, have a crack at praying, speaking to him and see what happens, like Reese did in that moment of desperation. Maybe that hour is to come to Alpha next Sunday. But I guarantee you, if you can free up a little bit of space this week and you can invest it in something that gives you intimacy with Jesus, you will feel lighter at the end of next week. And that's the last point I want to make, and I'll finish on this. But the more intimate we are with Jesus, the more aware we become that we were never supposed to carry that box on our own. We were never created to carry our little boxes of life full of all the stuff that's important on our own. We were meant to carry them hand in hand with Jesus. And we become more aware of that the more intimate we are. And the more intimate we are is led by the capacity we create to sit at the feet of Jesus Christ. Amen.